work. A lot of my projects involve visualization, sort of in the way that we tend to think about visualization. So I work on a lot of projects right now with visualizing research metrics. So for example, looking at things like H-index, citation counts, publication counts, to really visualize those kinds of numbers and metrics to contextualize what that might mean for researchers across disciplines. Also working on a project right now with Justin Shell on visualizing library collections. So we actually got data on all April ILL events from university libraries, and I've been working on putting together sort of a flight map of sorts showing where our items are coming from and going to. So I do a lot of work with things like D3, which is very popular JavaScript visualization library. A lot of work with other things like Excel, which is also a visualization platform, which we don't often think of it that way. But I do a lot with visualizing data. And I think that we're all here because fundamentally we all really work with visualization in our daily work, although we may not always think about it that way. We're all working with data in very different ways, and we're all trying to communicate data. And visualization is just one form of that communication. So this workshop, we're really going to focus on exploring what communicating data really means through visualization. And I really want to make us think about visualization a little differently than we usually do. And I'd like to explore this by thinking about dimensionless data. And we're going to do this through some hands-on workshop activities through limited media. So we're going to go back to basics. We're going to use markers and paper and sticky notes to explore how do we best communicate data and how can we apply those practices to be our own data in our everyday work. Okay. So as an overview here, we're going to start up with a little warm-up activity, get our creative juices flowing. Then we'll talk a little bit about thinking about design and visualized data, and this will draw some material on some previous workshops I've given on data visualization. Talk a little bit about data dimensionality and what dimensionality really means in terms of working with data. And then we'll spend the bulk of our time today on a hands-on workshop activity with markers and paper. And then we'll wrap up with some discussion and some conclusions. Before I move forward, I do want to mention that I have posted a handout that is not directly related to today's session, but it's from a previous session on data visualization that really just outlines some brief topics that I'll touch upon today, as well as some different ways of encoding pattern and quantity, and lots of resources and tools. So for example, I have a list here of tools specifically for doing visualization. So we see things like D3 processing, Gephi. Black box web-based applets, so things like Raw, Data Wrapper, if you've worked with those. And then also resources and further reading. So these are things like galleries, blogs, and communities that you can look at. Examples of good and bad visualization, which is useful. And then finally, some web resources on visualization theory and cognition. So if you're interested in looking more at those are available in the Dash drive. So like I said, we're going to start up with a warm-up activity. So I distributed markers and a pad of sticky notes to each table. And what I want you to do is, using the markers and the sticky notes, with the data set I'm about to provide you, find as many ways possible to represent that data. Okay, try and use up as many sticky notes as possible. I doubt you'll need more because there's 100 in each pad, but I have more sticky notes if you want. Okay? So here's your data set. 16 and 84. Oh, did you? Yeah. No. Okay. So you might have had good. Then they'll know how to do it. Good. Makes things easier. And looking forward, after I give you some time to come up with some representations, I'm going to have you as groups categorize your representations on the board and try and come up with some overall categories to share. Not yet. Yeah. So once you have come up with some representations, as a group, try and categorize your drawings, your representations, put them into subject headings, so themes, ideas, connections between the representations, share them on the whiteboards. And category can be interpreted broadly. So choose a whiteboard, and you can stick the post-it notes to the board, and yeah, yep. And you can use the markers to write categories. Yeah.
Don't write on the whiteboards with the Crayola
Yeah.
markers.
That would be bad.
They won't let us use this room again if we do. Well, I killed the conversation.
So if you haven't put your post-it notes on the board yet, take your time to do that now. We'll wrap up here in a minute or two. If you can find your own space on the whiteboard. Unless you feel so compelled to join another person's categorizations. Yes. Yes. So if you can find a spot on the whiteboard. Yeah. There's a little space over there, it looks like. Or over here, too. That may not be a good idea.
Don't copy my answers.
That number it's okay to put that number on this, or just the graph, using the graph to represent the numbers.
Any representation is fine.
So you put the numbers on it, it's okay.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Draw on your screen, draw on your tablets.
Okay, let's come back together as a group so we can keep moving forward. If you're still writing, that's fine. Okay. So let's walk through some of these representations that you came up with. Okay. So over here, it looks like we have some categories written here, tools and systems. So for example, representation of the data sets through currency, so dime, nickel, penny. We have different kinds of representations. So for example, using hash marks, using dots, multiplication with dots. Characters and symbols, so for example, 4x4, that's a representation. Artistic representation, so it looks like we have a 16-year-old and an 84-year-old. Physical manifestation, so that's similar to what we've seen. And relative size, so we have an example of a pie chart over here. The numbers intentionally added up to 100 for that reason. How about over here? So again, we see some hash marks, some dot representations, representations of the number by themselves. So writing the numbers by themselves is a visualization. We don't really think about it that way, but any sort of visual representation of data is a visualization. We have relative length, proportion. Pictorial, so we have a glass that is 84% full and one that's 16% full. Numeric, so again, we've seen that. Diagrammatic, so bar graph, pie chart, relative proportion. Over here we have proportions again, counts, color, so that's an interesting one. That's another way of visualizing. So here we have, looks like 16 orange dots and 84 blue dots. Okay. This last group over here. So we have spatial. So is this a map of Minnesota?
Yes.
Okay.
Hey, you finally figured it out.
So we have coordinates, so mapped in coordinate space. Humanized, so it looks like proportional sizes of humans. Symbolic, so again, using different symbols to represent quantity. And then we have conventional graphing, so things like proportions, length, distribution, area, things like that. So we've seen that there are a lot of different ways that you can represent the same set of data. And this data was intentionally dimensionless to raise that point. And it came to my attention that Justin may have sent out the inspiration for this activity, actually. So this comes from an article called 45 Ways to Communicate Two Quantities. It's really interesting to look at because it really makes you think about how two numbers can be represented in so many different ways. And the list on this article is not comprehensive, it's incomplete. And even just in this short activity here, we see that the same set of data can mean so many different things to many different people. So because of that, what we often find ourselves having difficulty with is, among this landscape of possible ways to communicate or represent data, which way is the best way? And I would like to argue that there's no really best way of communicating data or using a type of visualization to communicate data. What's more important is to focus on the design of your communication, because effective communication means being able to leverage your visual representation in a meaningful, effective way. Okay, so I've given this workshop or a type of this workshop a few times now, specifically on design thinking for data visualization. And I like to think that there are sort of three facets of design that really lay the foundation for thinking about how to do visualization. So the first is effective design. So this is probably what you might think about most commonly when creating visualization, how to use things like color, length, proportions, symbols, principles of psychology, principles of cognitive science to really communicate data as effectively as possible. We also have ethical design. So this refers to making sure that your representation of data is faithful to the meaning behind the data, intentional and unintentional. And the third facet is universal design. So this has to do with not only basic ideas around adapting for things like color blindness or low vision when creating visualizations, but also making sure that your visualization is conveying a uniform message. So making sure that your representation is uniformly interpreted by everyone who sees it. So in this workshop, we're really going to focus on the first facet, and this is effective design. And I'm intentionally having us work with limited media today because I think it will really help us refine our thinking about what makes good design without feeling like we need to rely on technology as a crutch. Oftentimes, the vast array of technological tools available to create visualizations do things automatically for us without giving us the chance or time to really think about our choices. So I have a few grounding assumptions that will guide us in our thinking today. And these are what I refer to as principles of effective visualization. So the first is that visualized data is intuitive. When you create a visualization, you shouldn't have to make the viewer or the reader do more work than they need to understand the message you're trying to communicate. Easier said than done. Second is that visualized data engages and invites the viewer to ask more questions. Not questions of the type where they say, what in the world is this saying? But really an invitation to inquiry. Make the viewer want to ask more questions about what might be hidden in the data and other patterns. And the third principle is visualized data facilitates discovery. So again, this is related to that inquiry. The reason why visualization is so popular these days is because it really can take a set of data that seems very flat and turn it completely upside down by highlighting new patterns in different ways we didn't consider before. So with those grounding assumptions, I have two main objectives for our work today. The first is to understand what effective visualization means in terms of clear, intentional communication of data. And the second is to develop the facility to become a data detective. And this means not only with your own data, but also with that of others. So I really want us to become critical consumers and producers of that data visualization. So I'd like to start us off here with a few guiding questions. So my first question is, if we're working today with dimensionless data, do you really think there's such a thing as dimensionless data? What do you think?
Steven says no. Do you
Would
care
you
to
care
elaborate?
to elaborate?
Everything is in relation to something. If it was totally dimensionless, it would be unaddressable. And once you got relation, you've got distance and all kinds of things.
Other thoughts?
Just off of that, riffing off of that, I was thinking about how you have to first collect data, which suggests that you need to create and carve out the boundaries. So just, yeah, I think building off of that idea is that already in the collection process, you're already creating some distinct ways that you can work with it from there for the analytic methods.
Anybody else? So there seems to be this idea that, at least figuratively speaking, there's really no such thing as dimensionless data. So let's look at some examples. Is this a dimensionless data set? We might look at it and think literally it's dimensionless. There are no units. There's no description. There's no explanation of where this data is coming from. What about this one? Is this dimensionless? So this is the exact same data set, but it's ordered differently. And so we're starting to see some aspect of dimension coming into view. What about this set? Is this dimensionless? So we've lost the ordering from the last representation, but now we have a temporal distribution. That's another dimension. What about this one finally? So again, the exact same set of numbers, but this time they're being represented in a coordinate fashion. So let's come back to that. Second question, what does data dimensionality look like in your own disciplines? What kinds of data do you work with in your own disciplines?
Well, I mean, as a historian, you work with all sorts of different data sets depending on your discipline. So, you know, a labor historian might work more with, you know, numbers relating to employment, to wages, and such like that. You know, a migration historian might work with numbers relating to migration numbers. And, you know, you're also working with maps and with all sorts of other sort of visual representations of data.
So history is a really great example because there are a lot of different dimensions to the kind of data that's used. So for example, we mentioned maps, so spatial distribution of data. History is about time, so temporal distribution, as we saw. What about other people?
Data that we work with in the libraries is bibliographic data, inventory type data, circulation, ILL type data, so distinct number sets, plus looking at the metadata and perhaps analysis of call number, you know, subject distribution, how many times a particular word, data mining might be done in that area.
So disciplines can have very diverse levels of dimensionality.
I study sound data, so I look at things like frequency and amplitude and time as well in those sorts of things. So those are some other dimensions to think about.
So the idea here is that there are a lot of dimensions to play with in visualization. And oftentimes, we tend to focus on probably the most obvious dimension. But one of the most effective things you can do with visualization is to emphasize those dimensions that are hidden. So my last question is, how is data transformed when you visualize it? And I sort of just answered this, but
I'm just checking for coding of behavioral ethnographic data. That's what someone just said online.
so how is data transformed when you visualize it?
Sometimes new data is created through that visualization. So data might be synthesized in a new way, or patterns can emerge.
I remember hearing a story about someone was working at one of the big universities in Saudi Arabia, and they had this huge data set, and they're just going through spreadsheets, and then they could not see the pattern. There was one flaw, something in this data set that they needed to pull out, and they visualized it and they could see it right away. So it, expanding upon that, you can start to see patterns or things that you couldn't see otherwise just from looking at the quote unquote raw data, even though there never is raw data.
So that sort of transformation is maybe something that we would see with this set. So I would agree with the overall sentiment that this set of data is not necessarily dimensionless. Okay, and the reason for that is for a lot of the reasons that we've already touched upon here, in that visualization as a mode of representation inherently ascribes dimensionality. And the reason for that is that because dimensionality is really an expression of the relationships between data. So even just by visualizing data, by writing numbers, you're communicating a relationship between those data, and that lends it dimensionality. So overall, we tend to work with two big types or domains of dimensionality. So qualitative dimensionality, so qualitative categorical data, and then quantitative dimensionality. And oftentimes, both of these dimensions are found in any sort of data set, which means that you can do a lot with visualizing a data set. So by doing this warm-up exercise, my hope was to get us to think about the different modes of representation that a set of data can take on. So we've seen some of these. So we've seen color, right? We've seen value. So this is representing numerical comparisons through a gradation of color or through some other gradation of texture, for example. Value can be represented through a variety of ways. So texture, so representation of discrete categorical variables. We have size and scale. So we saw a lot of this, right, in terms of representing data through proportions, comparisons. Orientation. So you see this kind of representation in mapping often. Proximity and density. So the way that we represent data in terms of its density, in terms of the closeness of data points, gives us an idea of how data group together, which is a mode of representation. We saw this one, length. So not only representing individual data values in terms of length, but also comparisons between lengths. Area, so again, another form of proportion. Proportion, as we talked about. And count. And really, these are all different ways of distributing the same set of data across new domains. And this is why visualization is really so effective, because visualization is most successful when unexpected interpretations emerge out of new dimensions. And when you use visualization to really highlight these new dimensions and find patterns that are not as easily observable in a set of data. So working with that, we're going to spend the rest of our time here doing a little workshop activity. So who's played the game Telephone? Raise your hand. Who has played Pictionary? Who has played Telepictionary? Okay. So we're going to play a game of Telepictionary with data. And this is how this is going to work. So at each of your tables, you have your markers, and I have a set of paper. Okay. We are going to generate a set of random data, a set of 20 random numbers. Okay. And at each table, I want you to make an interpretation of the data set. And then once you have that interpretation, visualize it. So you're going to have a set of 20 numbers, completely dimensionless, completely unitless, no inherent interpretation or meaning behind them, and you have to construct the meaning or interpretation. So once you have visualized your data, you're going to pass on your drawing to another table. And that table is going to try and interpret your visualization. And then based on that interpretation, create another visualization that highlights a new pattern or dimension in the data. And we'll do this 2 or 3 more times. Okay? And by the end, we'll get everyone's visualizations back to their home group, and we'll do some comparisons. So let's go ahead and generate some numbers. We'll just do 20, between 1 and 100, make things easy. So there's your data set. So take about 5 minutes to copy this data set down if you need to, come up with an interpretation, and visualize that interpretation. Yep, so 1 visualization as a group. Yep, so 1 piece of paper for each group. Yeah. Although I think this website prides itself on being a truly random generator, because I think it's based on like atmospheric noise as opposed to an algorithm. Did you copy them down? Uh-huh. That sounds interesting. Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. You need it back? Okay. Theoretically 5 minutes, but if it takes a little longer, maybe flexible. Yeah, why not? Yeah. We have the space, so. New representation based on your interpretation. So the idea is you visualize a set of data, another person interprets it and finds a new pattern in it. Try and wrap up in 2 more minutes here and we'll pass on. I needed a bunch for a workshop on data visualization I gave at St. Olaf once. And I think we acquired double somehow. We have like 10 boxes now. Yeah. Okay, let's try and pass on to another table. So try and wrap up quickly what you're doing. So I want to try and do this 2 more times. What's that? Yeah, so pass it on to another table and then, yeah. So you wanna, there's one for you when you're done there. And I'm not sure which table is. So once you have another table's visualization, create a new visualization based on your interpretation of what's given to you. I'll try and do this kind of quickly here because we're running a little out of time. So you got theirs. Did you get one yet? So there's for you. So this goes to you. Okay. Will I break things if I want to try and use a document camera with UMConnect? Do you know? Will it break things if I want to use the document camera with UMConnect? Okay. Okay.
So I think what's going to happen is, yeah, so here's the document camera, and so it's going to show up like that on there. So just when you're ready to use it, just switch between them.
Okay. Thank you. So when you're ready to pass on the new visualization you've made, you're going to pass both the one you made as well as the one you received. So you're going to keep all the visualizations from the different groups together when you pass them. Yeah.
We passed it to them last time, and we given it back to them. So.
All right, I guess we're.
Yeah, don't overthink it. you mind if I go over 5-ish minutes?
Trust the system.
What tables still need to pass theirs on? And you? Is it them? I'm not sure. Maybe them, maybe. So I'll give about 5 more minutes for people to finish up this third iteration. We're not going to pass on one more time. But I'll give you about 5 minutes to finish your last visualization. I think they do. What's that? Not yet. So this last one. Oh, okay. So you should have someone else's. Another group must have their original. Yeah. Well, you can make a new one on your own if you want. So I think Janice said you've used the Regent Scholarship before? So let's come back together. And I thought we could do just a short discussion here of some of our experiences. So I'm going to see if I can try and get. Hello? Hello? Is it working? So I thought I would try and use the document camera if it'll work. But I'm not sure how to switch to document camera. Can I have a group that wants to come up and, does every group have their own visualizations back? So let's do that first. And then can I have a group come up and show the results? Which you started with. Wait, who did this belong to? Is this your groups? I don't know who this is. Okay. Okay. Can I change it so that the projector shows the document camera too? Because it's showing on the Connect, but. Okay, there we go. Thank you. Okay. Do I have one group that wants to come up and show their original visualization and the others from the other rounds? Okay. So I have the document camera up and running here so you can share. So start with the original that you created.
Okay, this was not, someone wrote 1, 2, and 3. Who did that? So this was actually the first one. Yeah. Okay. These are the high and low temperatures of October in Minnesota.
Good.
So we had some extreme days. It was 100 couple days. Is that all you want me to say?
So what about the other ones that were based off that?
Which one was the second one? The one behind?
So what's going on in this one? Who made this one?
Please explain.
We didn't understand that it was high and low temperatures in the first one, so we just put all the numbers in one line and saw how they related to each other in a giant line.
How about the last one? So who did this one?
We didn't finish. We actually thought the first one was the second one. So we were getting the average of the two numbers that were for each data point. But we didn't finish.
All right, so you had the right idea here. I don't think we have time to show some more, but the point I wanted to get across with this, let's see, how do I get back to, here we go. That good? Good. So the point of this exercise was to think about, given a set of dimensionless data and your interpretation of it, how do you communicate that effectively so someone else can understand it? So even in this small example here, there was some misunderstanding, right? So it's really important to do things like labeling or presenting your data, just generally speaking, in a way that makes it perfectly transparent in what you're trying to communicate. And so if we come back to our question of, is there such a thing as dimensionless data? I think sort of the consensus we'd come to is that no, there's no such thing as dimensionless data. And really, when we do visualization, visualization really assumes that data are essentially infinitely dimensional. There are many different patterns, many different dimensions that you can draw out of a data set, and you shouldn't feel like you're restricted to the most obvious patterns, okay? So I hope this was fun, maybe useful. Hopefully got you to think a little bit about how you practice data visualization in your own disciplines. If you have any questions, you can contact me. Again, there's that handout in the Google Drive dash folder. Has some more resources you can look at for galleries and articles and things like that. So thank you.
So we're gonna have a quick switcheroo, and now Lucas is gonna come up and talk to us about mapping. We should probably just motor on. So, unless you drank too much coffee. No, yeah, just use this computer.
Oh, it's that easy these days.
That easy these days. Technology.
All right. Cool. Yeah. All right, how do I get my screen up on that? Ready to go. Okay. All right, well, let's get started with the second half. Good morning, everyone. I'm Lucas Winzenberg from the Polar Geospatial Center and USpatial here on campus. USpatial, we support spatial research on campus. So
after this course, when I hope you've got some questions about mapping, you can come to us and we can help you. You can walk in, email us, call us, and we can sit down and help you with your mapping projects. The Polar Geospatial Center, we're over on the St. Paul campus. We're funded by the NSF to provide satellite imagery and maps for polar researchers and scientists. So everything from mapping glaciers to counting penguins, all kinds of cool stuff. So get to work with both those groups on campus and do lots of interesting stuff. Thanks for inviting me to talk today. So let's just jump right into it. I'm sorry, this is the wrong version. Somehow, it's my old version. So let's not jump right into it. And I think I have to run an email to myself very quickly. Sure, yeah. All right, just sent. All right, we're good. So that's the first lesson of the day. Give your files unique names so you know which one's which. You teach the same workshop multiple times. So, okay, moving right along. Let's start with a quick activity, a couple quick activities just to get into it. So my question for you, and just think of this in your head, is how many windows were on the first floor of the house you lived in when you were 12 years old? So take a second and count those up. Okay, I see people pretty much done counting. It depends on the size of your house, but it looks like most people are through. My number was 10. I think that's right. That's not counting every individual pane. When I do it, and I think pretty much everyone describes it as happening this way, is I started and I was walking through my house. So I started in the living room and kind of walked to the dining room and the kitchen, and there wasn't a window in the bathroom, and I came up with 10. And maybe your number is different, but possibly you walk around the inside of the house or maybe the outside. I don't know if people do that or not. I always walk through the inside, but it's a good way to start to get your brain engaged to think spatially. So we're going to use that mindset as we go forward today to create a hand-drawn map of your house and places near your house. So this can be your current house or your childhood home or whatever you think of as home. There's paper on your tables. We've got all these great markers from Steven, so get creative. It's exciting. We'll take 3 minutes to draw a map, and you won't be graded. You won't have to share it, so go nuts. Whatever's home for you. Take another minute or so. All right, put the finishing touches on your maps. Okay, if you didn't get everything you wanted. All right, cool. It's actually a really unusually diverse group of scales and things included in the map. So it's really great to see today. I don't always say that. So can I get 1 or 2 volunteers to tell me what you drew? Sort of, is your map of your neighborhood or your house, or what did you include in your map, or what did you leave out? Yeah, right.
I did my house and my neighborhood and kind of the intersection that has a garden store, a coffee shop, and a movie theater nearby.
Okay, so it's sort of a zoomed out map. You've got some natural or some cultural features there. It looks like all the blocks and the streets. Cool, nice. All right, anyone else? Yeah.
I did a floor plan of the first and second floor of my house.
Great, okay. Did you include just the layout, or is there furniture and things like that as well, or just the building
just the
itself?
layout of the rooms.
Okay, so your approach was more of an architectural diagram almost. All right, one other maybe?
I did mine from a 10-year-old point of view of my house from way back when. So I have my house, my neighbor's houses that I would hang out with, and then the park. And then as it got farther away from my house, the less I knew of the map of it.
Sure.
And then I also had the strawberry farm that we'd go every summer to go pick from. So
Okay, cool. So cultural points of interest and some natural features. Really great. I saw quite a range. I even saw someone had the whole United States on there, which I've never seen before. It's really cool. And your house is just a dot, so maybe that's the easy way out. I don't know. But if you look at your map and think about how features are related. Depending on the scale, that'll kind of change. But did you draw blocks, maybe, or streets, and how are houses related to the blocks, and how are streets? What's the relationship between the streets and the features? Are features always on the streets, or are they offset? And the scale of your maps can kind of change the relationships between those features. So you've got probably some points, some lines, some polygons, and we'll take a look at those relationships among those features today as we go forward. So I'm just going to show you how we think of the world, and by we I mean map makers, and today we'll all be map makers. So we'll think of the world like this today, as a series, taking the real world and break it into a series of layers so we can examine those relationships. So your maps probably have things like natural features, built features, cultural features, roads, and so forth. And that's how we think of the world as cartographers or map makers. And it allows us to do some really cool things. So we can take a layer of West Nile outbreaks and a layer of median household income, and we can figure out the relationship between West Nile and income, or average rainfall and West Nile, things like that. It's really powerful to be able to look at the world like this, not just as a static map, but as a series of layers that we can move up and down and analyze and examine. And so we'll try to do a little bit of this stuff today as we go forward. Today I'm going to talk about web maps. There's the print map world of static maps that we print and put in textbooks and journals, and there's web maps, which are these dynamic, interactive maps that are so popular today. So web maps are visually intriguing, I think. I think they're really cool. When I go to NewYorkTimes.com and I see some map, I always want to play with it and engage and zoom around and pan around and see what's on there. And to that end, they're dynamic. It's not just a static snapshot of something. We can click on features and learn more. We can pan around. We can zoom in. And people understand maps pretty well. They're pretty intuitive when they're done right. If you're doing your job correctly, people are going to know, okay, this is a map of Minnesota. And they can make their conclusions from there and dive deeper. Web maps are really easy to share. With the click of a button, you can share it with people all over the world instantly, as opposed to getting people to buy your book or subscribe to the journal you publish in or whatever. You can share quickly through your homepage or through mobile devices or etc. And web maps are the future. They're exploding right now. You see them more and more everywhere. More people are making them. A long time ago, cartographers were the sneaky people tucked away in basements with maps and drawing boards, and now everyone can make maps. And I think it's really cool. So these are not web maps, what I'm going to show you, but they're awesome, and I want you to see them. Here's a pretty famous map by Eduard Imhoff of Mount Everest. And this, to me, is just a beautiful piece of cartographic work. The textures and the colors and the detail, just incredible. This is hard to accomplish with a web map, unfortunately. But there's a lot we can do with a web map that this map can't do. There are a lot of limitations to this map. If I wanted to click on one of these points and figure out the exact elevation, that would be hard with this. I can take a guess based on the topography and the contour lines, but if I wanted to click on a point and learn the average snowfall there, I can't do that with this kind of map. But it's fun to look at. This one here, another incredible map by Beran. That's just kind of bird's eye oblique perspective. I could never dream of making something that's beautiful. It's incredible, I think, but it has its limitations, just like the last map. We can only really learn what we can see here. And this one by Harold Fisk, showing the flow of the Mississippi over time. You can see these different channels that have been carved out. And this is beautiful. I love the colors. I love the detail, kind of the hand-drawn look of it. But imagine if we could make this into an animation and see the river channels forming, or turn layers on and off and see at different points in time. And that's something we can do with a web map, and we'll learn how to do that today. Let me show you a few web maps that I think are really cool. There are lots of examples. I just threw together a few that I'm kind of excited about right now. starting with this one. This is a map, time-enabled map made on CartoDB.com. So this is the World Cup match between Brazil and Germany. You may remember it. It was painful to watch. I had to turn it off. I think painful either way. We'll see if we can get it to load here. So these are tweets. The person gone and scraped the tweets, and all the yellow are tweets about Brazil, and all the red are tweets about Germany. And you can see the game happening down at the bottom there. You can see the score. So, you know, we're at halftime right now. It's 5-0 Germany. People all over the world are tweeting about Germany. Oh, Brazil must be doing well. Yeah, exactly. Oh, Brazil scored. All right. But it's still 7-1, so it doesn't really matter. So if you look at the start of the game, everyone's hyped about Brazil. And then Germany starts scoring, and slowly the Brazil tweets are fewer and fewer. And this is really cool, I think. And this is just taking tweet data. You know, they're all geotagged, so we know where people tweeted. We know what time they tweeted, and we can just make the simple visualization from that data using CartoDB. All right, good. People seem to like that one. That's good. This is an interactive application, The Age of Humans. I'm just going to slowly go through it. This is made with Esri. It's a story map template where we can pick whatever story we want to tell from our discipline and tell with a series of interactive maps. So I'm going to skim through this, but as I scroll through here, I enter these new tabs. And these are all maps. I can read about, you know, the backstory of this project, and here's my population map, and I can zoom in and pan around on this and get my new maps showing different themes. I wish I had time to kind of go through each one, but this is a lot of data in one place. I can go to this one link and see all this amazing stuff. You know, I can read through my story here, and I can enable little hyperlinks that jump to Saudi Arabia. There's some crop circles in Saudi Arabia there. And this is something that anyone can create. If you've got some interesting data to map and a story to tell, you can just plug it into this template and you can share something just like this. This isn't something that a team of programmers created. It's just kind of a template that's out there ready to be used. You may have seen this one. I'm a big fan of it. The U of M campus history map. I love this thing. Maybe everyone's seen it, maybe not. You know, we can visualize the history, the footprint of the University of Minnesota, and we can turn different georeferenced historic maps on and off, see them over time, you know, grouped into different time periods. We can turn air photos on and off, and we can add different layers as well, like transit routes and footprints, Goldie Gopher over time. And we can play this as an animation. Let's see. I don't know what that thing is, but yeah, yep. This was developed by Ryan and some others at the Map Library. And we can watch the university grow over time. So here we're in 1930, 40, you see the gopher change, and we could add other layers into this from the maps and air photos. And this is really cool stuff. I mean, you can tell the whole history of the university in this one portal. So I love this one as well. Also made with Esri. Another Esri map, looking at the linked burdens of obesity and diabetes. So this is a story map template. Again, just kind of plug in your data and go. This particular map is showing us, it's a public health focused map, showing us the relationship between diabetes rates by county in the US and obesity rates by county. And we made two maps, and using this app, we can look at them both at the same time. So, whoops. So I can swipe back and forth here and see the relationship between diabetes in pink and obesity in blue. You can see, for example, in Colorado, really low in both. Mississippi, kind of the opposite. And I can click on a county Barber County, Kansas has an 8.9% diabetes rate. If I swipe over, it's got 34.5% obesity rate. Pretty interesting stuff. Really well done. I love this one. I think it just does a fantastic job of showing these two themes at once and giving us just enough backstory to want to explore on our own. Okay, one more for you. Earth visualized. This is cool. Years ago, this wind map came out. Maybe you saw it, visualizing real-time wind patterns. This is kind of the next level. This is visualizing wind and surface temperatures and currents and all kinds of stuff. So we can spin the globe around here. Let's go look at Iceland. We can zoom in. So there's something going on there. I don't even know what that is, but that looks scary. Whoops. Okay. I bet we could find that. Yeah. Look down here and see if we can see a hurricane. So we're looking at wind at the surface right now. There she is. So, we can view ocean currents as well. We can change the projection, which is cool. All these different projections. Get crazy. Honestly, this still confuses me, but there's so much cool stuff here to see, all in one portal here. So we can visualize wind speeds, temperatures, relative humidity, all kinds of stuff. And this is all made easy with web mapping. I'm gonna be honest, this isn't too easy to make, but yeah. But looking at it is easy, so that's good. Showing it to you is easy, so that's a start. Yeah, exactly. All right, so we're not gonna get that far today, but it's not, out of reach. So let's go to another quick exercise with our groups. We've seen some examples of cool maps and applications. So you're all coming from different research areas. Let's just take 2 minutes to talk about, if you had unlimited technology and time and skills, what would you map in your research area? What's something you want to map that maybe hasn't been mapped yet, or what's been mapped that you want to improve upon, and what are the limitations to that beyond time and money and things like that? So let's take a few minutes, just chat with your groups. Cool.
Like that's pretty standard. That I feel like is a model. That is completely new.
Wow. Where in England is that? What part of
It's up
England?
in Lytham St. Anne's.
Okay. What?
It's a little bit out of ways from. I'd say about 45-minute drive from Manchester. So it's like
Oh, okay.
England.
Yeah.
That's like.
It's crazy. Yeah. It's beautiful there. All right, let's sort of wrap up the discussions. Okay, well, I'm really happy to hear that people are so excited to talk about what they want to map. That's awesome. So hopefully USpatial can help you with some of those mapping projects, help you get started. And we offer some free training workshops as well, both 3-hour and day-long workshops that I'll remember to plug at the end here, hopefully. So I want to give you guys enough information so you feel comfortable diving in and making a map today. I'm going to run through some information about data and some best practices for making maps, and we'll try to kind of fly through it so we can spend the time actually making some maps. There are two types of data that we work with in maps. There's spatial data, so this describes the actual locations of things, and there's tabular data, and the tabular data describes those spatial locations. And I'll run through each of these. So the vector data model is pretty common in mapping. It's spatial data, and everything is either a point, line, or a polygon in this model. So, you know, we saw maps today. They were mostly vector. You know, each tweet in their Germany game was a point, for example. So points are things like pollution sites, or fire hydrants, or intersections, addresses of participants in a study. They've got a discrete area on Earth. Lines are things like rivers, roads, bicycle trails. They're just strings of points joined by line segments. And polygons have a closed off area with perimeter and area. So national park boundaries, watersheds, census tracts. Polygons, points, and lines work really well together in mapping. And in the vector model, everything becomes one of these, no exceptions. There's also the raster model. So this is a different way of representing the Earth. So instead of using points, lines, and polygons to display features, we overlay a grid, a regular grid of cells over an area, and we give a value to every cell in that grid. So this works really well for continuous features like elevation, rainfall, temperature, not so well for tweets or something like that. So in the raster model, we overlay this grid, and in this example, we're looking at elevation. So in the real world, we'd see this nice mountain landscape. As a raster, we see a grid of cells, and each cell has an average elevation value. Could be median, could be average. Doesn't really matter how it's calculated. Those grids can be different sizes as well. That's called resolution. So really small cells is a high resolution, and large cells would be low resolution. We can represent the same thing either way. It just kind of depends on what's more appropriate. So in the bottom left, we see the real world. It's a little nature scene with some trees and a lake and some hills. As a vector, those become polygons of land uses or a line for the river. And as a raster, that becomes a grid of cells with each cell being given a value of, marsh or grass or water, whatnot. So we can do it either way. As we can see here, we're looking at the same scene, a beach, some water, some trees, as a raster or a vector. So it really depends on what's more appropriate. And we see rasters a lot more in things like natural sciences. Cultural things are typically represented as vectors, I would say, as kind of a general rule, but you can certainly do either. We're going to work with vector data today because it's faster to work with, it's simpler, and the files are a lot smaller as well. They do work well together as well. Here is a raster of elevation in Kansas with a vector of counties overlaid. So we're looking at raster data with vector data over the top of it. So they certainly can play well together. Some common spatial data formats when we're actually making maps and we want to get, a shape of the United States or of Cuba or of Hennepin County, we might find it in one of these formats. So a shapefile is the de facto standard for mapping these days. Works across all mapping platforms and applications. A shapefile is going to be either points or lines or polygons. So if I want to find, the shape of Minnesota, I can go search for a Minnesota shapefile and find it very quickly. GPS is another common format. These are points or tracks. You can go out in the field with a GPS unit and take these measurements, and I could walk down the greenway in Minneapolis and make a line of the greenway from my GPS track. Another common format is KML. This is basically Google's version of a shapefile. So if you work with Google Earth or Google Maps, they've got their own proprietary format that works very similar to a shapefile, but it's just Google branded. And increasing in complexity a little bit are web map services. These are things that people serve up to you to use with a predefined style. So the Metropolitan Council here in Minneapolis will serve up any number of layers for you to use in your maps. So you can pull them into your maps. You could do parcel boundaries or land use, things like that. You can't really control how they look, but you can bring them in and use them in your maps. We're going to work with some shapefiles today. Just keep things simple. Common tabular data formats. You can work with spreadsheets, Excel, text files, CSVs. And if you've got a spreadsheet that's got addresses or coordinates in it, you can have a map in a matter of seconds. You can go from a table of locations to a series of points on a map very quickly through a process called geocoding. So we can create spatial data from tabular data very quickly. And they work together in web mapping extremely well. On the left, we've got our spatial data. We've got our points. So we'll say those are business locations in Minneapolis. And behind those points are spreadsheets that tell us what they are and where they should be placed. So I can click on this blue point and I can see that's a hospital. And I can see it was built in 1975 and so forth. So the tabular data back up the spatial data in GIS. Let's run through a few best practices for making maps before we actually start making maps. Let's start with this. So making web maps is really easy. It takes some finesse to make a good one. For every good web map I showed you, there are 50 really hard to read web maps out there. So following a few simple rules, we can accomplish some really beautiful maps. So this is not an example of a beautiful map. This is what I consider to be a really awful map. Maybe you disagree. Maybe I shouldn't have prompted you with that. But what do people think? Can someone tell me one thing they like or hate about this map? Yeah. Okay, the colors, agreed. That's actually a really good way of saying it, yeah.
I've seen.
So colors, Minesweeper gone bad.
I've seen this map, I don't know how many dozens of times in different workshops, and I still can't remember what it actually is representing.
So I set out, I hope you agree this is pretty bad. I set out to make the worst map I possibly could. Just for sport, the red dials and the yellow arrows, it's the same layer on there twice. And that's pollution sites in Minneapolis from the MPCA. That's a little worrying. The orange, those are all the parks in Minneapolis. So park spaces, you can see, so this is Minneapolis. You can see Lake of the Isles in the bottom left corner, the Mississippi in the upper right. Blue, those are all the blocks, the census blocks of Minneapolis, and I've colored them based on percent minority population. So we see some interesting spatial patterns there. Brown is water, typically not the best color for water, but honestly, it's more realistic. I mean, I wish the Mississippi were this beautiful blue color like in the Caribbean or Mediterranean, but unfortunately, we've got brown water here. And orange, those are Nice Ride bike rental kiosks within a half mile of the University of Minnesota. So really no theme whatsoever to this map. Doesn't make a lot of sense. And keep this in mind as we move forward today. Don't do what I did here. So the art of cartography is selecting just enough information to convey the message of your map, like this. So think about what you want to say and how you can effectively communicate your message. We'll run through a few just basics here. Color is important. There are a lot of conventions in color, and I'd recommend following them. Culturally, we have a lot of associations with color, and personally as well. When I see red on a map, I often think something something went wrong. Maybe it was an earthquake or a hurricane or something. Blue, I tend to think of water. Browns and greens, maybe natural features, or maybe income if it's a thematic map. So take note of what other people are doing. I encourage you to bend the rules, but don't go crazy. Don't make your water purple because people aren't going to know what's going on. Here's a map of whatever this means, percent Asian 2000. So we're looking at Asian population in the US. What do people think about the colors that we're using in this map here? Do you like these? Is this easy to read or hard to read? Pleasing to the eye? Yeah. Sure. Okay, so the use of yellow is culturally inflected and it's maybe best avoided in talking about Asian populations. I'd certainly agree with that. That's good. Yeah. Sure. Okay. So using some kind of sequential color scheme would probably be more effective as opposed to red and purple. For example, I have no idea if red is more than purple. I couldn't tell you. Yeah. Do you have a comment? That's right. There's no blue on the map, although it's in the legend, which is kind of throwing off our whole map. I mean, if we got rid of that category, which is 12 to 42%, we'd probably see a totally different. I think they're both purple. So I'm going to assume maybe blue was Hawaii as a guess, and it got clipped off the map, so we don't see that. So that's a good point. Use all the colors in your legend. That's a kind of a basic. So nice work catching that. Scale matters as well. So your map can be large scale, which means it's zoomed in, or it can be small scale, which means it's zoomed out. And the scale of your map is going to dictate things like the amount of data you need for neighboring areas and the size of icons. If you have a really zoomed out map, you don't want these huge circles for points. You want to make them scale accordingly or make them smaller. So the scale of your map is going to dictate a lot of those constraints for design and use of size and shape and color. A couple other things. When you're making maps, keep your audience in mind. And your purpose as well. So are you trying to persuade someone to vote a certain way or communicate just some kind of concept to someone or encourage people to explore an area? And is your audience children or scientists or general public? And keep that in mind as you use color and different icons and things like that. So there are many web mapping platforms out there. There are many we could use today. Some of them are free, some of them are not. I'm going to show you a few. I've got 3 here: CartoDB, GeoCommons, and ArcGIS Online. There are so many others out there, and I think you should definitely go see what's out there and see what you like. So CartoDB is a really great one. This is what they use to make that Twitter, Germany-Brazil map. It's not the easiest to work with. It involves a little bit more knowledge of things like SQL, so making these queries to kind of highlight what you want to show in your map. It's not so much of a point and click type interface, but it's probably the most powerful out there for making visualizations and showing really beautiful maps. You can try it for free, and with a U of M login, you can access one of the pay plans for free as well. But there's still some limitations. It's not a totally inclusive platform with your U of M login. But CartoDB is really cool. It's on the harder end of things to work with, but it also produces the best visualizations out there. GeoCommons is great, and I wish I could be more excited about it. It's a repository of something like 50,000 open source layers. You can just pull into your map and add your own and work with them, and it's really cool. I found that it often doesn't work very well in terms of actually being online. Sometimes it times out or is down. I'm assuming they're working on that, but if you like me have to display maps for someone, you don't want to come up here and see something like this where all the maps are timed out. So definitely explore it, but you can look at binders full of women or U.S. ski areas, all kinds of stuff. There's so much stuff on here. Yeah, it's a pretty old reference, but still out there. So this is really cool. It's been taken over by Esri as of late, or they've bought into it, which I assume means there's going to be some more investment in improving it. Maybe eventually, yeah, I could see that. The last one is ArcGIS Online. And this is something the university has bought into. We've bought a subscription account to it for the whole MinSkew system, which allows us to do some really cool, powerful things that basic plans don't allow you to do. And as a part of the university, you get access to that subscription plan, which allows you to do some pretty impressive stuff, like different kinds of analysis, so routing and hotspot analysis and all kinds of things like that. I really wanted to come here today and show you guys something other than ArcGIS Online, because I always talk about it, but I think it actually is the best, given that we're here at the university. We've got some pretty incredible features at our fingertips and a wealth of data layers, and we're really well versed in it as a university. So we're going to use this platform today to make some maps. I want to run through the basics of how to use ArcGIS Online, and then we're going to actually make some maps. So here's what it looks like when you're in the actual interface. If you've used Google Maps or MapQuest or whatever, you recognize this interface. You got your map. You can search for addresses up here. There's some tools we can use here, and so forth. So what is ArcGIS Online? It's a web mapping platform developed by Esri. They're kind of the main share of GIS software out there. It's cloud-based, which means you can make a little account and you can log in and they store all your data for you. You don't need to download anything. You can go to any computer or laptop or mobile device in the world and sit down and work with your data, which is really cool. They make it really easy to add data, to store it there, to visualize it. And there are two different versions, like I said. There's the public version, which is great, and a subscription version, which has all kinds of additional features. At a basic level, you can search for an address. Nothing too groundbreaking there. Type in my address and zoom to my house. You can change the base map. So instead of the standard Google base map we're used to, we can choose from, I think, 9 or 12 different base maps. We can search for data. There are thousands and thousands of layers up there. So if you want to look at manatee populations and wherever manatees live, I don't even know, you can probably find a layer of manatees. You can also add your own data. So you can take a table of addresses and make a point map from it, and then work with that manatee data as well. No idea why I chose that today. You can customize the appearance, so you can change the size, shape, color, features, upload your own icons, and you can share your map easily with people all over the world. They don't need accounts to see your maps. You can share it through iOS devices, Android devices, applications. You can embed it in your website, all kinds of different ways to share. Let me show you a really quick demo of adding some data from the web, and then uploading your own data and changing the symbology at a basic level. So here I am at arcgis.com. I'm just going to sign into my public account. Hopefully know the password too. Yes. So I'm logged in now. I see some more tools are at my disposal here. I can search for an address, so I can go to University of Minnesota. See what happens. Here we go. That looks right. I can change the base map, so I'm not too thrilled about this one currently. So I can do imagery, some high resolution imagery there, or I can do same one, terrain, which should work. This one, which is really great for thematic maps, like Great Canvas, it's just enough context so we kind of know where we are and what we're looking at, but it's muted enough so your data really will pop on top of this template. So let's just go with this one. So I'm going to go to add here, and I'm going to search for some layers. So I'm searching for layers other people have uploaded. Maybe it's individual users, maybe it's governments, universities, corporations. We don't really know. Search for Minneapolis parks and go. I find 23 layers that are up there, people have uploaded. So I see tree inventory from Minneapolis, parking ramps from Minneapolis, city of Minneapolis, parks near you, Minneapolis parks, park and ride lots. So we're searching on keywords here, right? So we're searching the title and the tags and the metadata, which hopefully there is some metadata for these layers. Here's a layer I made a couple years ago called Minneapolis Parks. I put it up here and anyone can download it now. And it's been accessed thousands of times, for better or for worse. Add that to our map, and there we go. Here's a layer of all the park spaces in Minneapolis. We saw it earlier in orange. There you go. So we can add this layer to our map, and then we can, add our layer of bike trails and put that overlay that on this and see the relationship between parks and bike spaces. I can click on a park, and I can see, okay, that's the North Commons Park. A bunch of other stuff here. I don't know what all this means. So that's adding data from the web. I can also add data from my computer. So if I add a layer from file, I can upload shape files or CSVs or text files or GPS files. So let's add a layer here. Gotta figure out where this went. Sorry, I'm not on my own computer here. Nope, let's see. Check out where my download would have gone. It did, and I thought it went to the desktop, but it's not. All right, well, you can also add layers from your computer. We'll get to that later. What's our time, Justin? Time that we end? Oh, yeah? Okay. Well, let's skip ahead to the actual mapping. If you want to stay and make some maps, I put some layers up in the up on the Google Drive. We've seen a little bit of what ArcGIS can do. And let's just skip ahead to the end here, where I've got a task for us. So the first thing we want to do is make an ArcGIS Online account. So you can do this at arcgis.com. So if you have your computers, which most of you do, you can go to arcgis.com. And in the top right, click on Sign In. And once you're there, you'll click Create a Public Account. I'm going to go to arcgis.com. And the top right, I can click on Sign In. And from there, you want to click Create a Public Account, not a 30-day free trial. It's going to prompt you just for a few simple things: name, password, email. They won't send you a bunch of spam. So you can use whatever you want for your username and password. Give you a minute to get an account here. So once you have an account, you're able to store layers in your content folder and make maps and share them and save them. It's all pretty intuitive, pretty user-friendly if you work with other kind of like Google Maps or even Microsoft Word. There's the file, there's the save, the export, that kind of stuff. We won't run through that in detail. So the exercise I had for us today, once you have an account, is I just came back from Manhattan for my birthday. It was wonderful. And I was curious about the relationship between demographics and locations of Starbucks in Manhattan. I haven't really explored them a lot. But I put up a layer of all the Starbucks locations in Manhattan. It's on Google Drive in the Dash folder. So there's a shape file, there's a point file of all the Manhattan Starbucks locations that I got from Esri's business analyst. And there's a polygon file, a shape file of all the block groups of Manhattan. And there's some demographic data in there relating to a few different factors, namely like for each block group, there's the percent white, percent black, percent Native American, and some other factors as well that we can add into it. So my challenge for you is to grab these layers from the Google Drive, download them, and then you can upload them into your map, and you can pull in other layers and see what kind of story you can tell with those layers. 2 shape files. You just go to Add Data and Add from File. So add them from your Downloads folder, and then pull in any other layers you want. I was curious to see what people would come up with. I don't think we'll get to the final products today, but if you make one, you should send it to me. I'd be really curious to see what kind of story you can tell with these 2 layers at your disposal. So I'm gonna come back to this in a minute, but I want to run through just resources. So you've seen some maps today. Hopefully you have some ideas. I heard everyone talking about what they want to map. I'm sure you're not quite sure how to accomplish that yet. So I wanted to this slide up here to show you USpatial's mission here. And our mission is to support spatial research on campus for anyone, students, staff, faculty. You can walk in, you can call us, you can email us. We teach 3 courses. We teach GIS 101, which is a day-long workshop in how to make maps. I really recommend that one. They're all free. We teach Web Mapping 101, which is a 3-hour workshop on ArcGIS Online. And Cartography 101, a 5-hour workshop on how to make beautiful maps. You can sign up for these at uspatial.umn.edu. If you have questions as you're working, you can call us, email us, stop in. We're here to support you. So I'm going to leave it there. The uspatial.umn.edu is up there. And if people want to hang out, if they can, work on some maps, I'm happy to answer questions and help you get started on your mapping project. So thanks.